We'll go ahead and get started. You guys, we are going to try to finish the hearing today on Senate Bill 128. We do have a few conferees left. I'm going to pick up with Nikki Chubb from Sharon Springs. Is she here or is she online? Nikki, is she available, WebEx? Okay.
Yes, I am here.
Okay,
Can you hear
great,
me?
Nikki.
Okay.
And if you could, okay, great. Yeah, if you could be brief, Nikki, and make your points, that'd be wonderful, because we do want to get to the proponents today.
Okay. Sounds good. My name is Nikki Chubb. I am from Sharon Springs, Kansas, which is on the way western side of the state. I am a mom to 5 children. I am testifying in support of Senate Bill 128. Living in a very rural community, we have very few educational options. I was born and raised in this county. I went to the local public school here, as do the 4 children. I have 5 children, 4 are of school age. So right now my kids are in public school, and the thing with living out here is that we have 0 options outside of public school and homeschooling. Most of the people who live here go to public school. There are a rising number of homeschoolers. And in order to do anything different, our option is to homeschool, which also means when you homeschool, you aren't allowed to essentially do anything else. And within the schools right now, our own local school actually doesn't even allow us to use our own gym. So it seems like a daunting task to take our children out of school and have the financial burden of homeschooling along with driving. It would be about a 60-mile trip one way to the nearest facility where you could play with a private school. I'm in favor of this. I truly believe that parents are best equipped to make decisions for their children, and I think that this bill would be a huge step in the right direction. It would help those most of the people in our community have. I'm a small family, and I have 5 children. I have sisters who have 9, friends who have 11. So I think that this bill would be a huge step in the right direction to help with some of the financial burdens of either homeschooling or driving 60 miles for a private option, or it may even allow us to start some sort of private option within our district. My husband is actually on the school board at USD 241, and with each passing year, we just see more things that are creeping in. I think they call them woke, but just things that don't exactly line up with our faith. And so I think we mainly support this bill because it would allow us to make the decisions for our children, and it would be a great step to freedom for us to choose where our children do go to school. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Nikki. Committee, are there any questions for Nikki? Seeing none, Nikki, I wanted to thank you. My great uncle actually used to run the paper out in Sharon Springs, so I am familiar with that area in
awesome.
western Kansas. Yes.
Awesome, yeah.
So I appreciate you participating in the process. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Next up would be Linda Borer from Ellenwood via WebEx. Linda, are you online? She's not online? Okay. If she comes, we'll come back to her. Connie Harrison?
Yes, I'm online.
Thanks, Connie. Would you like to testify?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Connie Harrison from Sharon Springs. I am a proponent. I thank you for Senate Bill 128. I thank you for the hope it brings our kids. We had a situation where 4 lawyers came into our school on November 18th and spoke atrocities to our children. We have no private school. We have no means of going of any other education. This would bring so much hope to the parents that were devastated by this. And we're not talking an exodus of school. We're talking just a hope that we can have another option. I received a call Friday night from my niece, my great niece, fifth grade, in school, listened to a video named Strange World, which had homosexual scene. And we're not saying that our faith doesn't say that this doesn't happen. It just says that it doesn't align with our ideologies. And we just would like to be able to protect our children from, and us decide what we're going to teach our children. And Senate Bill 128 would give us so much freedom and hope to do that. And I thank you guys for all your work in this. And again, if it would give maybe some options for people to pool, because I know we're a long ways from anywhere else. And one thing I was going to say is that it's okay to say that we have zero tolerance for some of the things that's being taught. We're not fighting flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. We're fighting principalities and powers and rulers of darkness. And we just want to be able to push back and say, you can't have our kids. So as you guys deliberate this, would you please just remember the kids? I thank God this is a great bill. You've done a lot of work on it, but when you go to start maybe thinking you need to change something, please just think of the kids and not the money. And I understand this is what you guys are about. I've heard testimony on arguing about, well, maybe this will get more, maybe that won't. Would you please just think about the kids? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Connie. Committee, are there any questions for Connie? Connie, it's great to see you, even if it is via WebEx. I hope you're doing well, and I appreciate you testifying. Committee, we'll turn our attention now. We do have several written proponents for the legislation. I'm not going to read them off, and they will be posted online within the next day or two. Oh, yes. Linda Bohr is online. Linda?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Linda.
All right, good. I have my, I'll let it read and be quick because I know you have other things to do. All right.
Thank you, Linda.
Honorable Chairman Tyson, Vice Chair Peck, Ranking Minority Holling, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I am Linda Bohr, wife, mother, grandmother, retired registered nurse, a missionary from Kansas who has lived on both coasts, lived in Costa Rica, Honduras, Lesotho, and Haiti. Our first child was born in Haiti, and by the time we moved back to the States, and he approached school age, and by that time there was a second child, we knew we wanted to go the route of a non-accredited private school, and we homeschooled. That meant foregoing a second income. Doing without a larger or better home, newer car, or more things is not really a sacrifice. It does not register on the scale compared to the child's education. But I am currently helping with the education of my 4 grandchildren, grades 1, 7, 9, and 10, because my son and daughter-in-law have chosen the same route we did. I know the financial burden incurred, so when I was asked to help, I accepted the responsibility to assume teaching language arts, civics, world, and ancient history, and also offered to purchase all necessary materials because I know the financial stress it puts on the family. Do I believe?
Could you just give us a brief summary? We have your testimony and can read it. Would you just give us a brief summary and high points?
Well, the high points, and I've added 2 because I was there last week and could not testify. So I did even more research when I heard some of the questions. It was an offense to me for someone to say that it would be a windfall if we were only paying $2,000, but we were to get $5,000. And I did some research. Roughly 3.7 million homeschool students in 2020-2021 represented a savings of over $56 billion for taxpayers. And those taxpayers did not have to spend a thing. So,
Linda, we're having technical difficulties. We can't hear you.
all right. bottom line is, we were accused kind of having a windfall of making money off of the tax credit we would get. But I think people forget that as one of the parents who would be working, that means there's not an income of $20, $30, $40, or $50,000. So I believe there is a place for tax credit for private school students and for homeschool. I'm only a grandmother helping. I can afford to do that. But I just think they're not looking at the fact that people do lose money in the workforce when they're homeschooling their kids. I thank you for the opportunity to get to talk with you. And some people has remarked that there's already a tax credit for poor people, and that is true. But I think others desperately need the Senate Bill 128 to keep from becoming poor or poorer while educating their children. So on their behalf, I kindly ask you for the support of Senate Bill 128. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Committee, are there any questions for Linda? Seeing none, thank you again, Linda, for joining us. Committee, we will move on now. Is there anybody else that would like to testify as a proponent? Seeing none. Opponents, Leah Filter, Scott okay. Well, we haven't got to the neutrals. Nope, we go from proponent to neutral. Scott, thank you and welcome to the Tax Committee.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. My name is Scott Rothschild. I am the communications editor for the Kansas Association of School Boards. We oppose programs such as vouchers, education savings accounts, and tuition tax credits because these programs divert funding from public education, which are required to serve all students, including those who are disadvantaged, disabled, and those with the greatest needs. KSB totally supports anyone who wants to have their child taught in a private school or a homeschool, but that decision should not be at the expense of funding a public school system that is here for everyone. It seems during the hearing on this bill and in other hearings this session, I've heard some use as justification for bills such as this and the Education Savings Account bill that Kansas public schools are not doing well, or maybe they are not really a public good. I think that is not considering the complete picture. Our high school graduation rates are higher now than they have ever been. Our graduation rates for subgroups are higher now than they have ever been, and that's very important. Our post-secondary success rates are climbing. Our test scores, at least the one I think that really matters, the ACT, is Kansas was one of only 6 states this year that did not see a decline in the ACT. More kids are getting college credit in high school and CTE and having individual plans of study than ever before. The assistance we are providing through the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act is going to be a game changer. The state board's Kansans Can outcomes are preparing our students for the future, and I think will be much more impactful than all the No Child Left Behinds or races to the top that we've seen in the past. In addition, the announcements of several huge factory locations here is a testament to the skilled workforce that we are producing in Kansas. And by the way, all this good news happened on the heels of the worst education disruption in over a century. The problems with this bill have been brought out earlier, especially the lack of any accountability. KSB believes we should focus on supporting our public schools, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Committee, any questions? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Scott. Just want to ask you, do you see this tax credit as a voucher?
Well, that's a tough question because it seems like the definition of a voucher kind of moves around. It's government using public tax dollars to promote a private school education. So in that respect, I do think it's a voucher.
Follow up, if I may, Madam Chair. You cited several instances of how schools are meeting the needs of students, such as graduation rate. Is graduation rate objective or subjective?
I believe, I kind of don't understand the question.
Okay,
It's an objective in that, you know, it's something that we measure, we compare it with other states. I don't
so
know what
as
you mean.
graduation rates increase, what is happening to student outcomes? Are they increasing or decreasing?
Well, I think we're going to have a conversation here about the state assessments and the NAEP scores. And
It's a
I'll,
very simple question. Graduation rates are increasing.
Right.
What are happening to student outcomes on any objective measure?
I think the graduation rates in that respect are an objective measure, and they are increasing.
Let me just put it to
sorry.
you this way, if I may, sir. Graduation rates are increasing. Student outcomes by any objective measure are decreasing and have been since 2015 before COVID. Is that correct or not?
I would disagree with that. I think,
I'm on KSDE's website and I'm looking at the trend line, sir, from KSDE.
I think you're talking about state assessments and NAEP scores. Is that right?
And ACT went down until this year to where it remained flat.
We were one of 6 states that did not decrease in
That
the
was
ACT.
flat.
That's what I
Okay.
said. We were
I'm
one of
sorry,
6
Madam Chair.
states
I'm
that
just
didn't.
pointing out that.
Senator
Thank you,
Erickson,
sir.
and it is a good point, because his words are accurate. It did not decrease, but your words are very accurate also, that it is flat for 1 year and had been decreasing. So thank you, Senator Erickson. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Rothschild, you indicated, and we've got lots of testimony here. I was looking to find your specific testimony, and I was unable to do that in the brief amount of time, but the indication was that KASB opposes things that would reduce the availability of taxpayer dollars for public education. So is KASB opposing the elimination of the sales tax on food?
On general kind of tax bills, KASB kind of tries to stay neutral, but on issues like this that particularly intersect with education, we will testify as opponents.
Mr. Rothschild, KASB has not remained neutral historically. They have frequently opposed tax cuts, such as a back-to-school sales tax holiday, and I have written testimony in my office to prove that. On the food sales tax elimination, we're told, about a $500 million savings to Kansas taxpayers, leaving money in their pocket. If public education receives 53% of that, that means that those who support eliminating the food sales tax are supporting reducing availability of $265 million to public education. So I realize, Madam Chair, that was a comment. I do have another question. It goes along the line of what Senator Erickson was mentioning. By the way, she was vice chair of the Workforce Development Committee. At that interim committee, the president and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents told the committee that the ACT test is provided free of charge to Kansas high school students.
We are on this bill, and we are running out of time again today, and I would like to finish today. So can you please get to your question?
Okay, thank you. I'll just be real brief. According to that, and you don't have to make a comment, I just believe it's important for the record, 71% of students are taking the test, and of those 71%, according to the ACT score, only 20% are college ready. So I don't see that our public schools are doing a good job of getting students college ready. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And committee, I'm going to rein us in again. This is not the time to debate the bill or any other issues. It is time to hear from conferees who are opposing the bill. So thank you, committee. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question. So we know all the assessments that are on the dashboard for education. What assessments are on the dashboard for, let's say, private schools or for home schools or anything? How often are they assessed, or are they types of assessments for them?
Well, I believe that's part of the problem is I don't believe there's any assessment of home schools.
So thank you, Senator. Committee, any other questions on Senate Bill 128? Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Our next conferee, Dr. Dina Horst. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Thank you. I assume it's on. I wasn't sure. Chair Tyson, Vice Chair Peck, and Ranking Minority Member Holland, and committee members. I am Dina Horst. I'm a member of the State Board of Education. We do have concerns about the provision of tax credits for parents if their child is enrolled in a non-public school. Many of the questions have already been asked and debated, whatever. So I will just move very quickly into more of the highlights. One of our concerns is that there will be fewer dollars available to the general fund, which would be exasperated in lean years. This is especially true when the bill requires if the tax credit exceeds the taxpayer's tax liability, the excess amount is refunded to the taxpayer. Given the number of court cases which have dictated how public schools must operate because they are funded by tax dollars, it is surprising that non-public schools would be interested in receiving tax dollars. Since they are funded by tax dollars, public schools are required to serve every child, while non-public schools can deny enrollment or retention based on academic performance and/or having special needs. Again, this is another pathway where tax dollars, albeit in this case through tax credits, would fund non-public schools without the same accountability measures that are imposed on public schools. Because they are not funded by tax dollars, non-public schools enjoy complete autonomy under Kansas law, with the exception of homeschools being required to register with the State Department of Education. We believe that schools receiving tax dollars should be required to accept and educate every child who has chosen to attend it. Until all schools receiving tax dollars must educate every child, regardless of circumstance, and are held to the same public accountability measures as are public schools. The Kansas State Board of Education will oppose bills such as Senate Bill 128. Thank you for allowing us to share with you our thoughts and concerns. I will be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Dina. Committee, any questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have one quick question. You mentioned right there at the end that the Kansas State Board of Education opposes SB 128 and such legislation. Has the state board taken a vote on 128? So my concern is
not 128, but we have a position that we will oppose any public dollars being used for private education. So that it's a general position.
That's the current.
Because 128 was not in the queue, so to speak, when all of this was decided.
So that's the current state school board, or the current members of the state school board have voted to take this position?
It included we did it in December. So it was before the new ones took office.
Interesting. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question. Thank you for being here today. You keep referring to public tax dollars. Can you just tell me where the public tax dollars come from?
From all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Thank you, Dina. Committee Hillary Junk is our next conferee, and I want to thank her for coming back for the third time. Yes.
So, Madam Chairman and committee, thank you for having me back today to voice my opposition against Senate Bill 128. My name is Hillary Junk, and I am a proud graduate of the Kansas public education system, and my professional success is a testament to the quality of the education I received. I'm back in the community to be a taxpayer, excuse me. I'm delighted to be back to support the community that so supported me in my education. I urge you to consider this bill beyond its noble intentions, as its impact is not just on the parents of kids seeking private or homeschool education, but also on parents with kids in public schools and also taxpayers without children. Because with any tax credit, we're incentivizing some behavior. First, as these tax credits could amount to a refund, I'm concerned that this bill incentivizes actively pulling kids from public education. But my second concern is that this bill elevates choice to the level of entitlement. Just because someone doesn't use a public service does not mean that they are entitled to the monies that support those community efforts. Can I get a tax credit for not utilizing the state parks or the fire services last year because I spent money on a gym or fire saving equipment? No, I cannot, because I'm not entitled to the monies that support public services. The influence of parental choice does not extend beyond the family unit. It does not mean that me and my tax liability therefore bear more of the community burden. I am gravely concerned by the lack of transparency, leaving this bill ripe for fiscal mismanagement and abuse. With this bill, Kansas citizens receive no questions asked tax credits to offset their educational expenses at alternative schooling things, including unaccredited schools and unaccountable organizations. I ask you, where is the transparency and where is the accountability? Accountability and transparency are vital components of any sound fiscal policy. I can understand the response to bureaucracy. There's plenty of it, but I want to acknowledge that the response to bureaucracy is not a free-for-all in another area that results in a black box of government. So I ask that we emphasize sensibility and transparency. I commend the parents that invest money, time, advocacy in their children's education, that none of that is misspent at all. And I'd like to assume good intentions in all that people do. But after 15 years in finance, I've learned the hard way, or as we may all know, the saying about what assumptions can make of you and me. And so I've learned to operate under the motto of trust, but verify. So I ask that any tax credit requires transparency beyond a just trust us. So I ask you to please vote no in consideration of Senate Bill 128, as it elevates choice to the level of entitlements, and entitlements without oversight basically equates to handouts, and I know we are not in the business of handouts. I welcome your questions.
Thank you for your testimony, committee. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate you stepping up and testifying, stating your position.
Yep.
However, a question for the many taxpayers that I know of that adamantly oppose any of their tax dollars going to public education. What should I tell them?
Sure. Well, my understanding, again, not a tax specialist, this is my first time doing this, so I'm going to give it my best. We support, are they okay with their tax dollars going to fire services and other community programs? Those are public services. So it's not, if we could do an opt-out society, it's gonna make it very difficult to plan any sort of budgets. We don't look good then from a commerce perspective to other employers, that sort of thing. People have choice. I mean, I'm not gonna really think that my tax dollars, I'm in full support of where everyone goes, but I have choice to participate in the activities that I do, but I'm not entitled to choose where my tax dollars go for the greater good.
Okay, Madam Chairman, I'm going to just follow up a little bit. I somewhat follow where you're going, what you're saying, and I appreciate that. But there are so many Kansas taxpayers that I have heard from in my 15 sessions that are opposed, as I mentioned, to any of their tax dollars going to public education because of the things that children are being indoctrinated with in the public schools. So I guess my point would be, I understand there are those that on both sides of the issue, but I see this as sort of a fairness because it's not a reduction in funding to public education. They will still receive their funding. It's just that students who are not a part of the public school system, could also have some funding. So as far as the reduction of state general funds, it's amazing to me. Well, I'm going to stand down on the commentary and just ask a question, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
The elimination of the food sales tax significantly reduces available funds for public education. So should we back up on that because it reduces funding or it reduces available dollars for public education?
So I'm here to testify against this tax bill as is, because as in, I can understand where people will be upset if their money was going towards things, but I ask it to be accountable and transparent. I believe the tax bill against food is pretty straightforward because things are coded so people would know if the tax dollars are, I'm confusing a few things here, but what I'm saying is I don't know what to say about the food tax thing.
That's fine.
That's
I
fine. That's an
appreciate you
answer.
being here again. I just appreciate you stepping up as a private citizen testifying.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I do appreciate your testimony. I just have a quick question. You keep saying, okay, we have to pay for fire departments and for the public good, and I agree with that. If the fire department, for instance, was only successful in putting out 20% of the fires it was charged with doing so, would you as a private citizen say, hey, this isn't working, maybe we need to look at some other options, or you just continue?
I'm a firm believer of we don't have to do something some way because we've always done it. And instead, I would look at, well, what's the underlying reason why? Or are we measuring it in the right way? That sort of thing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Clay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions. I'll just ask them both and you can answer them because they're relatively simple. You mentioned professional success. In which profession did you achieve this success? And then from which school district did you graduate?
I work in finance. I have 15 years in finance and investments, and I'm a graduate of the Olathe Public School System.
Thank you, Senator, and I thank you for your testimony. Since you are open to suggestions and other ideas, and you've thought about Senate Bill 28, what suggestion would you make to improve it, or you just want to see the bill not pass?
I would like to see transparency and accountability above all else.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, and thanks for your patience the last few days. Appreciate you taking off time from work to be here. Most noted. Committee, our next, is there anybody else that would like to testify as an opponent? Our next conferee as an opponent is Laura Catherine Hayden. She is online. Committee, we did find out we have the room until 11 a.m. If anybody has a conflicting schedule, then please feel free to exit, but we will continue the hearing until we can finish today. So Laura, are you online?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Madam Chair and the members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to share my testimony. Public education is a divisive topic these days, school funding being only one of the topics argued about. And I know that proponents and opponents alike are here because they care about the children in their homes and their community. I'm here today because I'm so grateful for the impact public school has had on my life and the life of my family members, including my 3 sons, currently in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the Olathe School District. All 3 of my sons receive special education services and have throughout the majority of their school careers, from speech services to center-based resource and so many services in between. We've had the opportunity to work with so many outstanding teachers, paraprofessionals, specialized staff. When volunteering in my son's elementary school, I've had the chance to observe teachers pouring into children, using their own money to fund special projects and hours outside their workdays to prepare lessons and attend events in order to bolster relationships and the self-esteem of students. Now that my sons are in middle school, I've watched them form positive relationships with adults outside our home. And our children need to have trusted adults besides their parents they can talk to. Our teachers provide that through clubs, athletics, time in the classroom. I believe that we should be adding, not subtracting from public schools. Incentivizing parents financially to remove their children from public schools subtracts from the overall pool of money our already struggling schools have to educate children. Better pay and more support helps retain our best teachers and staff. The best quality educational materials cannot be purchased without funding that comes from students remaining in public schools. In addition, private schools generally do not serve the public or the special education population. Even those students who attend private schools often receive special education services from their nearby public schools. As a child whose parents receive a tax credit to attend public or private school, also then have the opportunity to receive special education services from public school, which would further drain those public resources. The trained eye of a teacher can go a long way toward making sure kids are safe and have their needs met. The public school and teachers meet so many more needs than just teaching. They help identify kids that need special services, provide consistent adult mentoring and care. They're sometimes the only caring, consistent adult a child sees daily. My hope is that parents make decisions for their children's education without the carrot of financial incentive. We've explored many options for our children's education, from private schools to homeschooling, and that's a choice that should be available to everyone. It just shouldn't be at the expense of public schools and the children who greatly need those important services that public schools provide. Madam Chairwoman and the student committee members, I ask you to please help keep funds in our public schools. Public schools work because they are a public good, and public goods need all taxpayers to contribute. Kansas schools need taxpayer contributions to continue serving our children, especially those with greater needs. Our teachers and students need more resources and not less. Please vote no on SB 128. Thank you. I'm available for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Laura. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Laura.
Thank you.
Amy Hill, are you available?
Yes. Madam Chair and committee, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I'm here because I oppose Senate Bill 128 because it does funnel public tax dollars to private schools. And I believe that public tax dollars should go to public schools that accept and educate all children. You have my written testimony, but after hearing some of the testimony about people's experience with public education last week and this morning, I wanted to share some of my family's experience with public education. I have 3 children. I have a sophomore in high school, an 8th grader, and a 5th grader. And all 3 of my kids approach school very differently. And they've had some of the same teachers over the years, and they've had some different teachers. But I can tell you that all 3 of them have gotten the support that they needed to be successful from each of those teachers. I go to parent-teacher conferences for each of my kids, and every time I meet with my kids' teachers, I leave feeling very reassured about my children, and I have great confidence in their teachers. They know my kids, and they know what kind of kid they are, and it's clear they know how to connect with my kids. They give me questions that I can ask my children at home to engage with them about what they're learning in school, and they reassure me that if they have any concerns about my kids, they will reach out. My daughter's in 8th grade and school has not always come easily for her. In 6th grade, her teacher recommended that she take math strategies, which is a math support class. And she took that class and it was a lifesaver for her. They also rearranged her flex time so that she would have flex with a math teacher to support her in her math studies. And this year, as she's enrolling for high school, her math teacher recommended that she can take the regular math track without that extra support. And she could not have been more proud of that accomplishment. And I definitely credit her hard work for that, but she wouldn't have been able to do it without the support from her teachers. My 5th grade son is in the gifted program in his elementary school, and that's not something that we sought out for him. His 2nd grade teacher recognized that he might need additional challenge in the classroom and contacted us to go through the process. He absolutely loves the program, and we're so fortunate he's getting that extra attention. But we're also grateful that his teachers in his regular classrooms over the years have devoted extra time to make sure that he's engaged and challenged in their classrooms. So I would just ask that you please not undermine our public schools and teachers. Those teachers work so hard every day to ensure my kids' success and all kids' success, and they deserve your support. Our public schools are not one size fits all, and I think my kids are an example of that. They are required to take all children, and they do work to meet the needs of each child, and that's why they're supported by public tax dollars. If you pass this bill, you put the funding needed to support those teachers and the majority of Kansas kids at risk by giving tax dollars to schools that do not have the same obligations and not the same oversight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Committee, are there any questions for Amy? Seeing none, thank you, Amy, for joining us today. Next is Mary Sinclair. Mary, are you online? Mary, are you available? Committee will circle back. It seems to be some technical difficulty. Is there anybody else that would like to testify as an opponent? And this is unique. I have not done this before, but I am going to circle back to Scott, Dina, and Hillary. If you guys feel like that you didn't get to make a statement or that you have another comment, no. I just want to make sure that you felt like you had your time to say your piece. Okay, thank you. Committee, Mary, are you available yet? So the word is, Mary, that you are online, but are you unmuted? Okay. Committee, we're going to move on to neutral testimony. Is there any other opponent for the testimony first? Seeing none. Neutral, Jennifer Laporte. Welcome to the Tax Committee. And I know you've been traveling up here too.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Jennifer Laporte, and I am a leader in the large homeschool community in my local area of Kansas City, as well as I'm the chair of the statewide homeschooling association, which represents multiple homeschool groups across the state of Kansas. Homeschooling will never be easy, and despite limited finances, we have always done what was necessary to make it possible. As homeschoolers, we choose to privately fund our education in order to protect our educational freedom. I'm testifying neutral on this bill as it is currently written because I believe that a refundable tax credit would not support a homeschooler's desire for their education to be publicly funded or to be privately funded. And instead, I would ask for a non-refundable tax credit, or I would ask for homeschoolers who register as non-accredited private schools to be removed from this bill. Homeschool families have always done what was necessary to make their education possible, and I believe that a non-refundable tax credit would give them back the money that they currently pay, but would not give them any public funding. I thank the sponsors of this bill for their efforts, but we would like to see, as I said, as a community, for either a non-refundable tax credit or to be removed from the bill. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Committee questions? Senator Corson.
Just had a can you just say again sort of who you're representing? I just want to make sure the scope of who you're representing. Because we've heard from obviously a lot of homeschool parents who very much like and appreciate this legislation. So can you talk about who your
Certainly.
organization is?
So I'm representing the homeschool community in Kansas City, and I'm the chair of the State Homeschooling Association, which has groups from around the state, such as Salina or Hutchinson or Manhattan or Lawrence or places like that.
Okay,
so
thank you very much for that. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you, and thanks for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So to follow up on that last question, are you here representing the association, or you're here as yourself, however you have these positions in the association?
I appreciate that clarification. I am here representing the association, so I'm here to, I understand that the homeschool community is not unanimous in wanting it to be non-refundable, but I do represent a large amount of homeschoolers who do not want to use public funding because we do not want our educational freedom to be compromised.
Follow-up question, if I may.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So a follow-up question to your testimony. My understanding is you said that you don't like the refundable portion of it. Got that. So is your position that homeschool and private school parents should keep track of every expense they incur, or they should just not have to pay income taxes if their income taxes do not exceed the per pupil level?
I think that my understanding of the way the bill was written is that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding a non-refundable tax credit, but my understanding was that a non-refundable tax credit would mean that you would only receive the portion of the tax credit that, I guess, matched your tax liability. Am I understanding that right? Because I don't want to misrepresent anything. And I think that in terms of whether or not they should track their expenses in order to receive that tax credit, I think that that would be, I mean, I don't disagree with that option. I think that all the homeschoolers I know would desire to make sure that they are fully compliant with the law and fully wanting to use and steward funds appropriately.
Senator Peck, did you have a follow-up?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. I really don't have a follow-up, but I appreciate your being here and what you had to say. I would ask you to, as an association, ask homeschoolers if they don't mind keeping track of every dime they spend on homeschooling or private school, because if they travel on a field trip, for example, the mileage would be an expense. So I think I got where you're going, and I appreciate that.
I mean, I think, I mean, the way that I would, I guess, characterize it is like if I'm having a charitable deduction on my taxes, you know, then I have the receipts, and if I don't have the receipt, I don't claim it. I also would say that I would disagree with previous conferees on the expenses involved in homeschooling. In my testimony, I talk about the average cost, and But when I'm considering it, I'm considering the curriculum, the books, and any classes. I'm really not, I would not be into, I mean, miles and food and some of the other things mentioned, those are just part of life, and I would not be counting those in my costs personally, so.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for testifying neutral on this specific bill. So I didn't have a chance to read through the neutral ones. I've read through some of the opposition and the proponents. So what is the average cost that you said?
If you Google it, the average cost says $250 to, I think it went up to like $2,500. I put $2,000 in my testimony because that still seemed a little high to me. I mean, I haven't factored in inflation in that. But as I've been homeschooling for about 20 years, and so, and essentially, if you're committed to homeschooling, you're committed to making the sacrifices. And so whatever it takes, you do. And if that means you have to be super creative in accomplishing it, that's what you do. So.
Yes, may I have a follow-up question? Thank you.
Ready.
So if the average, and I Googled it many times, but I got a variety of answers. So there wasn't, it depends on who's doing the research, I suppose, and what kind of, who's keeping track of that type of data. Because like you said, there isn't a place where you have to turn in expenditures or receipts. So I think it's vague on the expenditure for homeschooling. So when you, because this, you're chair of this association, how do you keep track of success? Do you take the same state assessments that public schools do? That's the only way I feel you can compare apples to apples as far as assessments and such. What type of assessments would your association, how do you assess the students, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, the association that I'm a part of is essentially an association of associations. So it's groups that are kind of joined together. And so we don't have, it's up to the individual families in terms of how they do those assessments. Periodic assessments are something that is part of being a homeschooler in Kansas. I can tell you personally that our family does Iowa Basic Skills and PSAT, SAT, whatever the pre-ACT, I don't remember that one, has an Explorer maybe.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here this morning. So, thank you for being here. My perspective on this is in my district. I talk to homeschoolers. I very understand their fierceness of them wanting to be independent and obviously educating their children. I also know that, well, I guess my perception is that there are public resources that through the school district that sometimes if those homeschooling families want to leverage, they can. Is that correct? Are there certain resources or opportunities or sports teams or curricular?
I think there are, a lot of it varies by the district, and I believe there's been legislation in the past session and in this session that have tried to make it, you know, across the board that homeschoolers or even private school students have access to. For example, last year, it was required that homeschools could enroll part-time in a public school because before that varied by district. So that would be my answer at the moment is most of the time it varies by district, what you can use or not use.
Right, and just once again, as a citizen, you're paying those services, those public school services through your property taxes and through the state general fund. So obviously you need to have an access, a right to those types of public school services. So thank you.
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Jennifer.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Yes, Mary Sinclair, correct?
Yes. Am I still able to provide testimony, Madam Chair?
Yes, Mary is testifying to be clear committee as an opponent. Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Kansas PTA. I'm a parent of two. I also have a PhD in special education. I want to just point out a couple of things from testimony. The PTA's mission and purpose, because I think it's important to point this out, has remained the same for the past 125 years, focused on facilitating every child's potential and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. Our opposition to this bill first begins with its narrow scope. It overlooks most Kansas families if that is the intent of this bill. Over the past century, PTA has collaborated to establish programs and called for legislation that improves the lives of all children, from the creation of kindergarten classes to hot and healthy lunch programs, the separation of juvenile justice to school safety. With a continued focus on the lives of all children and families, PTA encourages committee members to consider more inclusive measures that could bring relief and support to all Kansas families. Consider, I think this was mentioned, the immediate relief that elimination of the food sales tax could bring. This action could help all parents today with every trip to the grocery store. Or consider voting for the bill, I believe, that's been introduced on the education sales tax holiday. Again, this could empower all Kansas families with greater capacity to prepare their children for the new school year. Or perhaps consider creating a family child care tax credit that could help make high quality child care and early learning more affordable to all families and help prepare all kids for kindergarten. A second concern is the inherent conflict of this targeted tax credit. I believe this has kind of been discussed. A robust public education system with an educated population to the rose capacities is central to the greater public good and the health of Kansas and our economy beyond the immediate benefits to students and parents. And I think some examples have been provided. I think it's also worth noting that the legislature is constitutionally obligated to provide for state board, to provide for the public education of all students. A third concern is the fiscal note of this bill is essentially $270 million in new unregulated expenditures, and without any change to public school enrollment. The expenditure is significantly more than the cost to even fully fund special education to the 92% of excess costs. And in that pathway could prevent erosion of the Gannon School Finance Agreement. As most of the proponents on Thursday and Friday noted, educating a child is expensive, and we know this is even more expensive for meeting the needs, learning needs of students with disabilities, English language learners, children living in poverty. Proponents noted that inflationary pressures are real. Small class sizes drive up the costs of private schools. The administrative tasks of documenting every purchase and expenditure is time consuming. And these are all true as well as the kind of responsible and honest employees of our public school systems. As taxpayers, we expect oversight for the use of public dollars, regardless of who is spending them. The Kansas legislature has already adopted a plan to ensure every child has the opportunity for career and college readiness through a combination of equitable and adequate funding of the constitutional levels and accountability and oversight accreditation process. Kansas public schools are just getting back to baseline this school year following decades of inadequate and inequitable funding, in addition to a global pandemic and unprecedented inflation and staff shortages. I welcome any questions you might have about Kansas public schools. The Kansas Association of School Boards has issued a fact sheet just last month that has great information on multiple metrics. On behalf of the Kansas PTA, I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 128. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mary. Committee, are there any questions for Mary? Senator Erickson?
Thank you,
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I'm glad you were finally able to connect in. I just have a quick question. You mentioned the Kansas Constitution and the legislature's obligation, and I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. So could you please repeat what you said about that part in your testimony?
Yeah, on Article 6, Section 1, the legislature shall provide for intellectual, educational, vocational, and scientific improvements by establishing and maintaining public schools. That part of the Kansas Constitution. Section 1.
So, if I may follow up, Senator, where does it say public education? in the Constitution?
It says public schools, maintaining public schools. Section 1, Article 6, Section 1.
Okay, it does say public. Okay.
Yes, a follow-up, if I may, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
Senator Erickson.
Yes, it does. It continues to go on to say, and related activities which may be organized and changed in such manner as may be provided in law. And if you skip down to Section 6 of the Constitution, when it relates specifically to finance, in Section B, it says the legislature shall make suitable provision for finance of the educational interests of the state. So my question would be, would you say that this then, as it relates to finance, doesn't relate to Article 6, Section 6? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Section 6, the final sentence is no religious sect or sect shall control any part of the public educational funds. And while this is not like the tax credit scholarship program that has SGOs that manage public dollars and direct them back to the public school system, it's functionally a similar facility that takes public school dollars and to subsidize the public school systems. I mean, that's what it does functionally. I mean, the tax credit is targeted for non-public school families. So that's how I.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would say that this bill, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Erickson.
Thank you. The last section about no religion. First of all, this does not go directly to any religious institution. And are you then saying that all non-public educational settings are religious?
No, I think that, but most of the accredited private schools in Kansas that, for example, are participating in the tax credit scholarship program are religious. The vast majority of them are. Probably not at the homeschools. We don't really have any information on the homeschools, so I wouldn't know how to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just note that in my district, I do have collegiate and independent, which are private schools, but not affiliated with any religious organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to make certain in your testimony that I heard correctly, because there may be individuals tuning in at this point that hadn't heard previously. What did you say the fiscal note was for Senate Bill 128 or 120?
Well, if all the potential for the fiscal note could be about $270 million if there's a $5,000 tax credit and we have 25,000 students in private schools, and then the same amount in homeschooling, that could be 200 if every eligible parent took advantage of that tax credit. Wouldn't that be about $270 million?
Okay, Madam Chairman, the reason I asked that question, the fiscal note we have been given is not nearly that high.
I agree with that, Senator Peck, and I'm glad you brought that up. After we finish with the conferees, we are going to ask Budget Director to address the fiscal note. We're going to spend a little bit more time on that than we usually do, but I think it's that important. Any other questions for Mary? Thank you for joining us, Mary.
Thank you all.
And your testimony. Thank you.
Go Chiefs.
Committee. I'm sorry. I haven't heard that today. No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. Committee, I'll turn your testimony back to written neutral. And again, it will be posted online also. Is there anybody else that would like to testify neutral on the Senate Bill 128? Seeing none, I am going to turn our attention to the fiscal note. Committee, there was an original fiscal note and then there was a replacement. Both of them were in your packet because I just like everybody to have all the information. I didn't want to confuse the issue. And thank you for being here for the hearing, you and Kathleen both. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Adam Prophet. I am the Budget Director for the state of Kansas. In front of you, you should have the corrected fiscal note, as the Chair stated. The corrected fiscal note should be the only one that the committee is referencing as it relates to the fiscal note for this bill. Full disclosure, my team, as we were working through the fiscal note process with each of the agencies, we did miss a component of it. We wanted to issue the corrected fiscal note. That falls on my shoulders. My apologies for any confusion there. So in looking at the...
I may, no apology. It's always good to have the information, so thank you very much.
Thank you. So in looking at the corrected fiscal note, I would say there are three components to this fiscal note. There is a fiscal impact as it relates to the known student count. There's an estimated fiscal impact as it relates to the unknown student count, and then there's an administrative impact, which is negligible in the grand scheme of things. So for the known student count, that would be for the accredited non-public students, anybody from grades K through 12. We know that during the 2022 to 2023 school year, there were 26,446 students. So if we assume that with a refundable tax credit that becomes available to all 26,000 students, the fiscal impact related to those students would be $128 million in fiscal year 24. It grows to about $135 million in fiscal 25, and goes up a little bit more to $143 million in fiscal 26. As it relates to the non-accredited students, we don't have a student count. The non-accredited schools are not required to submit any information on the students. They just have to register once they become a non-accredited school, and there's some information on that here. So the Department of Education did some reverse engineering to come up with an estimate that might have a student count. So they looked at and I'm on page 2, the second full paragraph there. We looked at census counts for Kansas by age and assumed a total number of students that might be in Kansas. We backed out the known number of students that are in public education, and then we backed out the known student count from the accredited non-public schools, which left us with a potential for 55,000 students in non-accredited non-public schools. If we use the same math, we just assumed that for every 1% of those 55,000 potential students, the fiscal impact would be $2.7 million. So again, that's just if 1% of that 55,000 is an accurate readout, and that would become linear. And what I mean by that is if 10% of that 55,000 estimate are actual students who take advantage of this tax credit, that would be $27 million, all the way up to $270 million, which is what I think the previous conferee was speaking to on that part. So again, the known fiscal impact is $128 million. The unknown student count would be for every 1% of that estimate would be $2.7 million, all the way up to $270 million. Below that, we have the administrative impact. The Department of Education states that they would need a 1/2 FTE, which would be about $40,000, just short of that per year, and that would be an ongoing cost. The Department of Revenue states that there would be some coding costs associated with that, about $100,000. That is a one-time cost and would not be ongoing. And in the Department of Administration, we are stating that this could have the potential to impact the debt set-off program because the debt set-off program relies on tax receipts. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. I think the committee does also. I would ask off first. It was discussed previously, students that homeschool and choose to participate in sports or extracurricular are required to register in the school district. And so that school district is getting a count and getting funding for that student. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Madam Chair.
Yes, and so with this legislation, that family would not be eligible for that tax credit because they are being counted in the school district. Is that correct?
To the extent that they're enrolled part-time in a public school, they would be excluded from this tax credit, correct?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make that clear. Committee, any other questions? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So to follow up with the chair's line of questioning, in determining the fiscal note, was the division able to ascertain how many homeschool students or private school students are not enrolled in some way, shape, or form for one class or an athletic team or something in a public school? Thereby, the public school would receive the funding and the tax credit would be unavailable to the parent?
Madam Chair, if I may, on the non-accredited schools, no, we were not, because we don't have any information on that. On the accredited non-public schools, I don't I would have to turn to Craig Newenswander, who's here with the Department of Education, to ensure. We did work with the Department of Education to see what their estimates would be, and that's where we got this information. So I believe they would be excluded, but I would have to turn to him to make sure.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So with all due respect, you said the known is $128 million. We don't know that to be correct, because if a student is part of a public school in any way, shape, or form, they're counted as part of the funding formula for that school, which means they disqualify for funding under 128. So my point, I believe, and it may be impossible to get that number, I do not know, but I'm concerned when we say that the known fiscal is 128 million when we don't know that that's the case.
If I may, and I apologize if I said known fiscal impact, I intended to say known student count, just outlining that we know what the student count is for that population. We do not know what the student count is for that population. So we have a known student count. To your point, if they are enrolled in a public school, that would reduce off the top. What I meant was known student count. I apologize if I misstated.
And I don't know, Madam Chairman, if that's possible, but I would request that we try to see if we can get a fiscal note.
So the Department of Education is in. Would you be able to help with that? And would you state your name for the record? Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Craig Newenswander with the State Department of Education. I believe what we know is that a student's enrolled part-time in a public school. We don't necessarily know where they're attending the other part-time of the day. I'll double check that for sure. So I don't know that we can tell you how many private school students are attending part-time, but I'll see if I can find out.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? I have a couple. So, and I guess it's more on the fiscal note, on the refundable portion. If the bill were, we've heard a little bit of testimony, if it was no longer refundable and it was a carry forward, what would that impact be to the fiscal note?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We worked with the Department of Revenue to do some estimates over the weekend and appreciate their time on that. I have not seen the full breakdown yet, but the high level estimate is that it would, if it were to be non-refundable, it would reduce the fiscal impact by approximately 25 to 30%. So if we just look at the 128 million, that would come down to just under $100 million, but 25 to 30% reduction by making it non-refundable. I don't think we've gotten yet to what the carry forward impact would be.
Okay. And if I may, Kathleen, and this may not be possible, but is there any way that we could know, I know I've read in the neutral testimony and a couple others, they say that not all students their parents wouldn't qualify because they don't pay taxes. But is there any way that we would know that as to, I know that would be a difficult search query for you guys, but you do have children on the income tax form, and would that be something that we could decipher as to how many would be impacted if we made it non-refundable?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. While we do collect the dependents on the individual income tax return, we are not sure where those children are attending school. So I am not sure that we could get down to the level of detail that you're asking for.
Could we make some assumptions that on the level of income, if there is a dependent, I know it may not be accurate, but we could get some type of estimate as to the possible number of families that could be impacted. I don't know if that's feasible or not.
We can try. We can look at it and
Okay,
see what we can come up with.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just kind of extend the Chairwoman's question about the non-refundable. Once again, my understanding of the non-refundables basically is that with the non-refundable tax credit, they could basically take whatever the base credit they're being offered, but basically just up to their total tax liability for the year, correct? Can you tease out what would be the further reduction to this fiscal note if we actually made them to provide basically, like we do our teachers with the tax credit we passed through last year's on their supplies, actually made them show, I'll call it major expenses like basically the tuition and the books, what would be the further impact to the state general fund? My sense it would go down significantly, but I'd like to see that. And then I do have a question just about estimating, Madam Chair, once more for Adam, because we're basing the fiscal note around basically those students who are basically in an accredited non-public school. Here's the real, I guess, question I have about this. Would this be, I mean, to me, the wild card is that the more you make the tax credit, if it's fully refundable, if they aren't, and just anybody can claim it, my question would be is there any way in the world that we can predict for that population student base currently in public schools, how they would react to that incentive?
Madam Chair, if I may, I believe the question is, what would the impact be to the current enrollment of public school students, and how many would move to the private schools because of this tax credit? Is that the essence of your question?
Yeah.
I don't think that we have an idea of how many that would incentivize to move into the non-public education.
I just think that's a material question because we could very well see, Madam Chair, a whole body of students being financially incentivized that could greatly, potentially, exceed the number of students we know in the non-public accredited. And then to me, I wonder if we're getting into basically a death spiral from a financing standpoint of our schools. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think that would be helpful. And also, maybe the breakdown too is of how many families would qualify to go to zero income tax. I do have concern over the refundable. I have that with every program that we have, including the EITC. It's just a concern of mine. And with the Apex bill, we have no idea what kind of check we could be writing to these companies. And I just want to make sure that this committee has a good grasp of what that means. Whether we decide to move on it or not on the legislation, we need to know those numbers. Committee, any other question for Revenue or Budget Director? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't see the number on the sheet, and maybe I'm missing it, where you said the 270 million that was kind of stated by the previous person that spoke. Is it on here? I don't.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, Adam.
It is, if you look on page 2 of the corrected fiscal note, the second full paragraph talks about the potential number of school students that would be in non-accredited, non-public schools. That is for every 1% of that estimate. If they were indeed eligible for this tax credit, would be $2.7 million. And that's linear, so if 100% are, it'd be 270 million.
So you extrapolated from there.
Yeah, it's just a reference number, 2.7 for every 1%.
All right, got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, any other questions? We're about out of time. If you do, please get them to Eddie or Adam or Kathleen or Department of Education. I do plan to take a look at this legislation, hopefully to work it at some point. No other conferees. Committee, we're going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 128. And thank you for your work on this. We do have a full schedule this week. I have a feeling there's maybe some adjustments to the schedule as a result of last night's game. I hate to admit it, guys. But we're glad the Chiefs won, absolutely, but we will continue to work as we can. I did plan on working some bills Wednesday, but there may be an adjustment on that schedule. So thank you, committee. Is there any other business to be brought before us? Seeing none. Yes, Senator?
Are you planning on working bills tomorrow?
If we have time, we will work bills as permitted. But we've got to get through the hearings too. I don't think, especially for the new members, turnaround is upon us. It is very short, so we are under the gun to get things accomplished. So I appreciate the committee's work. Any other business? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.